Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Soul-u-tions podcast. This podcast is a little different because I am taking a post that I made on social media, on the Instagram, and a comment that someone left in my DMs. We had a little conversation about this. And so I felt like it was important and I wanted to discuss it a little bit more here. So this one is for all of you who have had a hard time in life and who may have, you know, years of grief that you've been carrying along with you. And so I'm going to let you listen to the intro, and on the other side of it, we'll go a little bit deeper. I want this to be a soft place for you today.
Einstein said, "We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them." Most everyone in the world is solving their problems the wrong way. Our problems come from our thinking, and we can solve them with our thinking. So, whether you're at your lowest, just trying to grow, or whether you are trying to sustain growth over your lifetime, join us as we push the boundaries of our current thinking and redefine how we find Soul-u-tions.
The hope and the strength and the love and the smiles and the laughter of friends and family. Add it up, you'll find no limit to the possibilities.
So, Turner and I just got back from a 31st anniversary trip in the UK. It was amazing. I think the words he used were welcomed, much needed time together. We spent 2 weeks away, and that's the first time we've done that since our honeymoon 31 years ago. And it is the first time we've been away together without any of our kids or without it being a work event or some event with other people or family in 15 years. So I've shared with y'all before that my son Brennan was diagnosed with leukemia in January of 2009. So that's the beginning of the 15-year mark. Turner and I really focused on all of the boys and on getting through that time frame. And the marriage part just had to be a given for us during that time. And then when we came back, it was really hard. And I've talked about that before too in other episodes. And then Turner had a lot of surgeries and injuries. And then all of a sudden you're in the chapter of your life where you have aging parents. And this is just a heartbreaking part of your life, especially when you're close, I don't know, close or not close with your parents. I think it's just hard to get through. So we had a spectacular walk on not the cliffs of Dover, but down the ways a little bit. It's a place called the Seven Sisters, and they're these beautiful white cliffs. And France is across the channel, but it was so gorgeous. It was so dramatic. And as a friend of mine who lives in London said, I think you got the best day of the entire year for your day trip out there. So we took some pictures and I posted it. I shared it on Instagram, and this was my caption for it. Turner, just imagine this. And if you go to my Instagram, which is at Soul-u-tions Labs, you'll see this picture. Turner looks like he's on the edge of the world. He's sitting on the top of one of these cliffs with just blue sea behind him. It says, "I've been following this guy to the edges of life, love, and the world for almost 31 years now. Today was as spectacular a journey as any. We took a train from London to Eastbourne, hopped in a taxi, and climbed the white cliffs called the Seven Sisters. I love the time walking together. So much room to work things out, without and within. For me, this trip has been a gift of time to process the grief of the last 15 years of my life, culminating in the death of my father in January. while at the same time an opportunity to imagine what lies before us as a married couple and in our individual capacities. The time taken, our gift to each other. May you remember to give yourself the time and space you need to contemplate the places you've been, the heartbreak you've felt, and to dream forward. So, in my DM messages, this person said, I have read this over and over and over again, and I can't read it without crying. We've since had the opportunity to talk about it. She actually joined the Soul-u-tions Labs, and we were in class on Tuesday, and she said, I just need to talk about this post. And she's had a lot of grief in her life. She had a child who passed away right after he was born. And then another child who started having seizures for 10 years, had seizures every single day. And as a result, when you take care of someone in your life who needs extra attention, you grieve so many different things. And even if it's not a child, right? It could be a partner. It could be any loss. I run into it with people with divorces, with job losses. Life has a way for some of us of stacking losses, one right after the other. And when that happens, it's just the grief begins to build, and there doesn't ever seem to be enough time and space to process all of it. What she said in our class was, thank you for acknowledging prolonged grief like this. When you said that you have had 15 years of grief, she said, that is what touched me, because the messaging that she has been getting is like, it's time to move on. You know, honey, it's time to move on. You need to get past this. A lot of people tell you that. And I know that they are well-meaning, and there is truth in that, because we do need to go on. But when you have had years of grief, years and years and years of grief that have weathered you and changed you, you cannot go on in the sense, I think many people mean go back to who you were before, right? Go back to the place you were before having experienced the loss that you've experienced. So I wanted to bring this topic to the podcast just so that I could go into it a little bit deeper for you and know that you may not be following the Soul-u-tions Labs on social media. You may just be interacting with my work by being a podcast listener. But the amount of people, you know, in addition to this woman who is a new member of the Soul-u-tions Labs, is like, this is enough that somebody else needs to hear it. It is okay to be sad. You know, it is okay to need more time and space than people think is right for you to, that is appropriate for you, and to move on. You're never going to go back to that person that you were before. You just aren't. But in the grief, I think, I really think of it as like, it's like water and a cavern. If you think about something, the image that just popped up into my mind was like the Grand Canyon. Like, the Grand Canyon is spectacular. And there are not a lot of places like it, right? That's why we call it the Grand Canyon. It's just this spectacular thing. But I think that's the equivalent of a human being who has experienced prolonged grief in their life. I want you to think of yourself as this beautiful human specimen equivalent of the Grand Canyon. The grief and the loss has cut deep into your heart, into your very being, and has left such a gaping hole in you. But it's also carved within you so much beauty from a sense of the understanding of what life is, the understanding of the fragility of life, the understanding of how lucky we are to be alive, how lucky we are to have the time, how lucky we are when we are well. If you're thinking about, my friend's experience, with a child who had a seizure every day for 10 years. And like when she wasn't having a seizure, right? Like the contrast between that, I think, is what a person who has experienced prolonged grief has to offer the world. And so when people come up to you and suggest that it's time that you move on, I want you to just remember this podcast episode. I want you to remember that you're not alone. And I want you to tend to like how that compounds the loss and your grief to have someone say that to you. And just put your hand over your heart and just tend to that. Just tend to that like, I don't know how to do that. And this actually hurts to hear someone else tell me that. And then I want you to give yourself permission to work through some of this grief. Just know that you need more time and space than other people because you have experienced more loss than other people. It's not it's not like this pie chart where everybody gets an equal amount. I mean, you can't get through a human life without experiencing loss, but we all experience maybe different levels of it. And you've got a Grand Canyon level of it. And so that's going to mean you need more time and space, permission to give yourself more time and space to work through it. Know that you are carrying it with you, There's nothing to get over. It's just who you become when you let it draw that deep cavern within you, make your heart deeper and richer and more vibrant and more fragile and more sensitive to all of the things. So to the friends who may not have experienced that kind of loss, after you tend to yourself, this is what we usually get backwards. It's like, oh, I need to either people please the friend of mine who thinks I need to do it. So I need to cover up the loss. I can't be honest and truthful. I can't share it with anybody. We feel ashamed. We feel ashamed for carrying it. And that's what this new member was sharing. A lot of it was like, oh, I just feel ashamed. I can't seem to get over it. You can't get over it for a really good reason. You've been carrying it for a long time. And this other person has no idea what it is like. So once you've tended to yourself, you can see that other person with compassion and say, they may not have the capacity to walk with me as I carry my grief anymore. And that's okay. They may need a break from how sad I am. And that's okay. I wouldn't want them to have experienced the amount of loss that I've experienced. I really don't want any of my friends to have to experience it, or my family, or my children. And that's really what drives me to do this work. That's why I'm here doing this podcast. You know what? Have this Grand Canyon type of break within me, and in that capacity to work through that loss, have been given a gift of understanding that not everybody has that, and that's okay too. So I can free them from having to walk with me. I can do this work in an appropriate forum, right? I can work with a therapist. I'm working with a therapist right now because of this amount of grief. And I want to know and understand like the sources of all of it. And then I'm doing my coaching work along with that because I'm like, oh, I want to do the therapy work because I want to continue to have deep, rich, meaningful relationships with people. And I know I need to do some of this work. I need to understand it on a level of trauma that will help me get to that next place. So give yourself all the support that you need during this time. Like this woman joined the Soul-u-tions Lab. She's like, I know that I need more support in a safe place with people who have a capacity to, hold this comfort and allow the other people in my life who've been walking with me to free them from the burden of doing that. So there are resources available to you, and you are a very resourceful person. So make sure that you prioritize giving yourself the support you need, because if you have experienced prolonged grief, you deserve a little bit extra TLC in your life. And I hope this podcast was one of them. And if you have a friend who has experienced prolonged grief, or someone else in your life who you think would enjoy this podcast, would you please forward it to them? It helps get it out there, not just depending upon the algorithm to populate and suggest the podcast for people, but if you share it, that's a big help in me expanding I wouldn't say, well, we are on YouTube now, the viewership, but the listenership. And also, if you wouldn't mind leaving a review, that's very helpful as well. You can just go into iTunes and leave a review, or you can make a comment if you like to watch it on YouTube. So I thank you so much. Your continued support of this podcast is so encouraging to me to keep at it and to keep listening to what is relevant to you in the world. So have a wonderful day, and I'll be back in the studio in a couple of weeks with more podcasts for you.
'Cause I ain't done living the life I'm meant to lead, and I ain't done loving the ones who cared for me. The hope and the strength and the love and the smiles and the laughter of friends and family. Add it up, you'll find no